over the years, thousands of books for research. And so it's kind of like people will often ask you who's your favorite child if you have a lot of children. And you'll inevitably say it's like the last one, etc. So it'll be like the last books I read are my favorites. But there are some that stick out in my mind that have had a very, very big impact on me. So I can remember when I was very young, I must have been 15 or so, I got a copy of Machiavelli's The Prince. Now I can assure you that I hardly understood a word of it. I had never worked anywhere. I had no knowledge of power. I had never been in like a court-like environment. I'd never been around anybody that like a prince or anything. But I loved that book. I thought it was fantastic. It had no relevance to my life in high school, obviously. But what did I love about it? I loved the brutal realism of it. I loved the fact that he was looking at human beings as if we are these animals that we are. And he was analyzing it without all the usual guilt, all the usual moralism that's going on in the world. He was just presenting us as we are. I didn't really understand experientially what he was talking about, but the style of it, the clarity, the pragmatism, the beautiful language entranced me. And so I've probably read that book 6 or 7 times over the years in different formats. But that paperback, that really strange little spindly little tiny little paperback that I had when I was 15, boy, that had a huge impact on me. And you can see obviously the influence on my books. The second book, I studied ancient Greek in college. And you'll think, God, that has to be the most irrelevant subject anyone could ever study in university. And you're probably right. But it taught me some great things. It's the ultimate mental discipline. And I remember when I was in my second year, I believe, we were given Thucydides, we call it Thucydides, History of the Peloponnesian War. It took me 3 days to read one paragraph in ancient Greek. The language was so difficult, so weird. I had to think about each word and sentence, etc. And I thought, I came out of that, I go, the style of this is so insane, it's so intricate, it's so brilliant, it's so convoluted yet logical in its own way. And I became an incredible fan of Thucydides. And obviously I read it later on in English, the whole book. And it's the most beautiful thing you can ever read, because here you're reading about our history as humans some 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. And you've got this narrator who's so modern, who's someone who could be somebody who's sitting right next to you, who has this very clear perspective. And he's describing these events so far in the past. They're so dramatic and they're so exciting, and he's analyzing it brilliantly. I wish we had a handful of writers to this day who could be like that, who could have that clarity, who could have that kind of logic, who could have that kind of analytical ability. But it existed 2,500 years ago in this great historian, Thucydides. He wrote one book that I know of, the history of the Peloponnesian War, but it's the most marvelous adventure you could ever go on. It's a fantastic book. It had a huge influence on me, almost as powerful as the Machiavelli. The third book is a very weird one. It's not something that most people know about or that I've ever really discussed, but it had a very large impact on me. And it was a series of books written in the 60s by a writer named Carlos Castaneda. He was talking about the teachings of Don Juan, which is the title of one of his books. And he had a book called The Journey to Ixtlan. And if you ever pick up a copy of The Journey to Ixtlan, I think it's in the early 70s that it came out, 1970, 71, you will understand where Robert Greene got a lot of the 48 Laws of Power and the 33 Strategies of War. These are amazing books. Sometimes I wonder if they date so well because they come from the drug period. And basically what it's about is the author is an anthropology student at UCLA named Carlos Castaneda, and he goes to study indigenous Indian practices, and he comes upon this Yaqui Indian named Don Juan, who kind of initiates him in all of the ways of his indigenous culture. And it includes eventually ingesting peyote and learning to become a crow and all of these weird things that you think, wow, that's too weird. But a lot of it is this stuff that's all about power. It's all about controlling yourself. It's all about confronting your mortality. It's all about becoming this great warrior in life. And, if I read it now, I still love it. It's not the same as when I read it when I was 16 and I was getting excited by all that stuff, but it's still very impactful. It's still a wonderful book. And I'm actually using a little bit in The Law of the Sublime. So those are the 3 books that I think have had the largest impact on me. Of course, I'm leaving out Friedrich Nietzsche, who had probably the greatest impact on me of all. But there's not one book I can single out. There's like 8 books. And then, of course, there's my favorite novelist, Dostoevsky, who had a huge impact on me. I can't pick out one novel. I'd have to choose 3 or 4. So that's my convoluted, long-winded way of answering that question.